In the crowd, a man looked at a woman, and suddenly the woman turned around and tackled the man. This was the first person in Japan to be infected with a zombie virus. In just a few days, the virus spread throughout the country. 4 years later, Tokyo, Japan, had turned into a dead city. Beneath the city was the Japanese branch of the Umbrella Corporation. At this moment, 2 soldiers guarding the outskirts were successively attacked by unknown armed individuals. Umbrella Corporation's high-ranking officer, Albert, sensed something was wrong and immediately dispatched armed forces to guard the elevator entrance of the base. However, when the elevator doors opened, it was empty, and they failed to notice that the enemy had already infiltrated the base through the ventilation ducts. Indeed, the intruder was Alice, who had come all the way from North America to Tokyo. The soldiers just realized the danger behind them when they were met with 3 flying darts, causing several of them to fall instantly. Alice wielded 2 knives as she charged into the crowd, like the Grim Reaper, cutting and slashing, leaving dismembered limbs in her wake. The soldiers had barely managed to shoot back before more than half of them were already dead or injured. Finally, 3 soldiers managed to react and open fire at Alice, but their bullets couldn't even touch her. Alice quickly found cover and used corpses as shields. With a sweeping barrage, she turned the soldiers into a hornet's nest. The last soldier tried to resist, wildly firing with 2 guns in hand. However, Alice swiftly performed acrobatics, rotating 360 degrees in the air, evading the incoming bullets, and as she landed, she threw her samurai sword. But just as she had dealt with 1 squad, she found another squad already prepared and waiting for her. Alice didn't want to waste time and unleashed her superpowers. It's hard to imagine such formidable combat prowess. It's hard to imagine that such a powerful combatant is just one of Alice's clones, and there are enough clones like this to form a whole army. Soon, Alice's clones were scattered throughout the base. Albert realized the dire situation and had no choice but to abandon the base. Boarding a helicopter to evacuate quickly, Albert also activated the base's self-destruct sequence on his way out, and in a matter of moments, the entire base was obliterated. However, Albert was unaware that Alice's original self had been waiting on the aircraft all along. Alice stepped forward, pointing her gun at Albert's head, but Albert directly injected her with a newly developed serum. The serum neutralized the T-virus inside Alice's body, stripping her of all her special abilities. Alice, whose strength had been greatly reduced, was no match for Albert, and was instantly beaten without the ability to fight back. Just as Albert was about to deliver the final blow, the aircraft suddenly sounded an imminent crash warning. Albert turned around to find the unmanned plane hurtling towards a mountain peak. Alice miraculously survived. Months later, Alice piloted a plane heading to Alaska, intending to meet up with Claire and the others. However, upon arrival, Alice found the place deserted, with numerous planes parked on the ground. It seemed that this was not the sanctuary mentioned in the broadcast. Where had all the survivors gone? After a thorough search, Alice finally located Claire's plane and the diary she had left behind. Alice wanted to record everything, but suddenly saw a figure flash by in the distance. She hurriedly chased after, but the person had already disappeared. Seeing the shaking plane door, Alice thought the person had hidden inside, only to find a group of crows instead. However, just as Alice relaxed her guard, a woman suddenly rushed out and knocked Alice down. As Alice struggled to break free, even without the T-virus enhancement, her skills were still impressive. She quickly kicked the woman away. When Alice turned the woman over, she realized it was Claire, with a moving mechanical spider on her chest. As night fell, Alice removed the spider, and Claire woke up, but Claire had lost her memory, not even recognizing Alice in front of her. It seemed that the spider on her chest was the cause of the problem. There was no choice. Alice could only fly the plane, searching for survivors, while waiting for Claire's memories to return. Soon, they found their way from Alaska all the way to Los Angeles, but the city had already become a scene of devastation. Not to mention survivors, there were barely any zombies left. However, just as Alice is about to head to the next city, she suddenly discovers tens of thousands of zombies gathered on the outskirts of a prison. Upon closer inspection, there are actually a few survivors on the roof of the building. Seeing Alice's plane, the few survivors seemed to have grasped a lifeline, but after Alice circled around, she found that the prison was completely surrounded by zombies, and it was impossible to get in from below. So Alice made a bold decision to land directly on the rooftop. The survivors understood Alice's intention and immediately cleared the way. Alice dived downward and smoothly landed on the rooftop. However, due to the short runway, even with power lines as a cushion, the plane still crashed into the edge of the wall. It was about to fall from the 100-meter-high building when basketball star Luther leaped forward and, with the help of others, managed to pull the plane back from the edge of the fall. After a brief introduction, the survivors asked if Alice had come to rescue them. Alice expressed her regret. It turned out they had also heard the broadcast. The so-called Alaskan sanctuary mentioned in the broadcast turned out to be a mobile ship. The ship was constantly gathering survivors along the coastline, and they decided to head there. However, the prison was surrounded by zombies, making it nearly impossible to reach the ship. Alice's plane could only carry 2 people at a time, and even if she made multiple trips, there was no guarantee of a safe landing each time. Later, under Luther's guidance, Alice prepared to take a bath in the bathroom. However, not long after Luther left, Alice heard unusual sounds. With a revolver in hand, Alice carefully approached the source and discovered a bald pervert, intending to spy on her while she was bathing. An angry Alice ordered the bald man to leave immediately, but he suddenly showed a terrified expression. It turned out to be a zombie. Alice reacted quickly, shooting the zombie in the head. The bald man wasn't so lucky, as he was grabbed by another zombie and dragged into a tunnel. Soon, the others rushed over to check and found that the zombies were capable of digging tunnels. It seemed that the prison was no longer safe, and they had to find a way to leave immediately. With no other options, Alice learned that there was a prisoner in the prison who knew the way to escape, but to get his help, they had to release him. Although everyone thought the prisoner was dangerous, Alice decided to open the cell. As soon as the prisoner came out, he noticed Claire standing nearby. He turned out to be Claire's older brother, Chris. However, Claire was still suffering from amnesia and didn't recognize her supposed brother in front of her. At the same time, a giant creature carrying a several-ton axe was quickly approaching the prison. Chris immediately led everyone into action. He informed them that there was an armored vehicle behind a steel gate, big enough to carry everyone to safety. There was also an arsenal inside the prison with all sorts of weapons. Just then, a tremendous impact sounded outside the gate. It was the executioner, wielding the massive axe. Everyone split up and acted accordingly. Alice, Chris, they walked towards the flooded armory. Claire and Luther held the gate to buy time. Others were tasked with opening the steel gate and retrieving the armored vehicle. Soon, Alice arrived at the door of the arsenal by swimming, but just as she is about to move on, a zombie suddenly emerges from the water and drags a female companion into the water. Then, an endless stream of zombies swarmed from the water. It turned out that not only could these zombies dig tunnels, but they could also swim. After taking care of a few approaching zombies, Alice and Chris managed to reach the arsenal. Seeing the array of weapons, Alice was thrilled. Meanwhile, the steel gate was successfully opened, but unfortunately, the engine of the armored vehicle was outside. It would take at least a week to repair the vehicle. Upon hearing this news, Bennett didn't hesitate and shot his companion to death. Bennett planned to quietly take Alice's plane and leave. The prison gates could no longer withstand the blows of the executioner's giant axe. As Claire and the others stepped out of the gate, it was destroyed. The executioner led countless zombies swarming towards them. Claire and the others escaped to the rooftop, only to find that Bennett had already boarded the plane. Alice also arrived on the rooftop, but Bennett aimed his gun at them and flew away in the helicopter. Helpless, they watched the helicopter fly off, and a large number of zombies also reached the rooftop. While shooting back at the zombies, they quickly retreated to the elevator, but it was out of order. Alice had to cover their way to the downstairs bathroom first. Once everyone is in the lift, Alice drops a bomb on the top of the lift. Using the accumulated water in the elevator shaft as a cushion, they safely reached the ground floor. Meanwhile, Alice faced the attacking zombies on the rooftop without any panic. She tied a wire to herself, threw a bag of bombs before the zombies could catch up, and then jumped down from the 100-meter-high building. The pursuing zombies fell like raindrops from the tall building. 1 second later, the bomb exploded. Before landing, Alice disconnected the wire and, after dealing with a few zombies, landed safely. She quickly passed through the zombies, and with Luther's help, successfully reunited with the group. The only way out was to follow the tunnels dug by the zombies because they led to the sewage pipes, which, in turn, connected to the ocean. Chris took the lead, followed by Luther, but Kim hesitated. Suddenly, Kim was split in half by a giant, rotten hand. It was the executioner who had come. Alice kicked the executioner in the face, but it had no effect, and she almost got crushed by the axe. Under the executioner's powerful and ferocious attacks, Alice could only keep dodging. Just as Alice found an opportunity to counterattack, she was hit by the executioner's axe and slammed heavily into the wall, losing consciousness. Seeing Alice about to be cut in half, Claire came to her rescue and diverted the executioner's attention by shooting at him. The executioner turned to attack Claire, swinging the axe fiercely behind her, but she managed to avoid it by ducking. Seeing the gun on the ground, Claire had an idea. When the executioner charged at her, she slid, picked up the gun from the ground, and pulled the trigger, hitting the executioner from below. The executioner was hit and fell to the ground, but just when Claire thought the crisis was over, the executioner got up again and threw his giant axe. Fortunately, Alice woke up just in time to help Claire dodge the deadly blow, and then she raised her gun and blew off the executioner's head. After that, Alice and Claire caught up with the group and successfully followed the tunnel to the sewage pipe. However, Luther was attacked by zombies from behind. When they came back to their senses, they found that the tunnel had been sealed by falling debris. Helpless, the remaining three had to abandon the rescue and continue forward, finding a small boat to head towards the giant ship. But when they managed to board the ship, they found the deck empty. All they saw was Bennett's helicopter. Later, the three arrived at the cockpit but found no one there. Everything seemed to be functioning normally, and the computer showed there were thousands of survivors. But where had they all gone? With this doubt, the three began to search around the cabin, only to find a large steel door with the Umbrella Corporation logo on it. Seeing this, Claire instantly recalled everything that happened before her memory loss. They had just arrived in Alaska on a plane when a group of armed men arrived on a speedboat and placed a robot spider on their chests to take them by force. Only Claire managed to escape. Clearly, all of this was a trap set by the Umbrella Corporation. At that moment, the large steel door in front of them suddenly opened. The three cautiously entered, and the door closed behind them. The lights in the cabin suddenly turned on, but there were still no survivors in sight. Claire found a control panel that showed the Umbrella Corporation was conducting experiments on these survivors, keeping them in the experimental pods below. Claire quickly opened all the pods and found her captured companions. As Alice followed a trail of blood, she walked into another cabin full of Umbrella Corporation helicopters and found a self-destruct program similar to the one at the Tokyo base. She continued forward and found several corpses. As the display screen rose slowly, she discovered Albert. After surviving the plane crash, Albert had successfully survived by using the T-virus. Just then, two zombie dogs appeared. Alice pulled out her gun, but Bennett aimed his gun at her from behind. He had become one of Albert's henchmen. Alice's arrival had been part of Albert's plan. The T-virus was too powerful, and Albert needed to consume human blood to prevent mutation, so Albert sends out a deliberate disinformation to draw the survivors to the ship. But the blood of ordinary people doesn't help at all. As the only one who perfectly integrated with the T-virus, eating Alice would suppress the T-virus in the body. However, Alice was not going to surrender. She quickly kicked over the nearby food tray and then knocked the gun out of Bennett's hand, but the flying cutlery was easily dodged by Albert. After knocking out Bennett, Alice tries to pick up the gun on the ground, but the two zombie dogs surround her, and it's clear that the zombie dogs don't agree. Just as Alice faced this predicament, Claire and Chris arrived just in time, aiming their guns at Albert. However, Albert remained unfazed and casually threw his sunglasses, instantly launching an attack on them, with the T-virus enhancing his abilities significantly. Albert's speed and strength were unmatched. The siblings were no match and were quickly beaten back into an experimental chamber and locked inside. Meanwhile, the zombie dogs continued their attack on Alice. She evaded one of them skillfully and seized the opportunity to grab a gun from the ground, shooting one of the zombie dogs away. The other dog lunged at her, but Alice used a piece of fallen glass to kick it right into the zombie dog's mouth. Just then, Bennett launched a surprise attack. Alice instinctively used her hand to block, but she ended up getting stabbed in the arm with a dagger. Albert saw his chance to devour Alice but was met with a counterattack. Alice plunged the dagger she had pulled out into Albert's head. However, even with a vital blow, Albert didn't go down. Bennett was ready to sneak in again, but the arriving survivor grabbed the gun on the ground before he could, and then gave Bennett another hard blow. And Albert stretched out his tentacles full of fangs and attacked Alice again. In the nick of time, Alice took the gun thrown by the survivor and directly shot Albert's head. Even without half of his head, Albert was still struggling on the ground. Alice took the opportunity to release Claire and Chris from the experimental chamber. The siblings stomp on Albert at his feet and shoot him a few more times before leaving. They also locked the wicked Bennett inside. Soon, Bennett encountered something horrifying, and agonizing screams echoed through the area. Surprisingly, Albert was still alive and managed to escape in the helicopter, devouring Bennett's body to regenerate himself. Before leaving, Albert initiated the self-destruct system on the ship, but this time, he was unsuccessful. Alice had already placed a bomb on the helicopter, and when Albert realized it, it was too late. Miraculously, Luther, who was captured by the zombies, also survived. Then countless survivors came on deck. The three Alices planned to take over the ship and broadcast to the outside world to save more survivors, but what they didn't expect was the arrival of countless helicopters from Umbrella Corporation.